Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second day of the European Information Days of the LIFE program. We started yesterday with some general presentations and some presentations on some of the calls for proposals. And today we will go more into detail of some of the calls for proposals that are published, and you can find them now in the Funding and Tender Opportunities portal of the European Commission. I would invite our audience to already connect with us by joining Slido. You can just type slido.com on your mobile phone, and then the hashtag is EULife24, all in capital letters. And there you can you can both ask questions to our speakers and answer to our polls that we will launch during the day. So this is the agenda for today. We will present a series of calls for proposals for standard action projects. We will start this morning with the calls for proposals for climate action projects. Then after the question and answer sessions and after the coffee break, we will present calls for proposals for projects in the sub-program Circular Economy and Quality of Life. And this afternoon will be dedicated to calls for proposals for nature and biodiversity projects. And then don't forget that after each session, we will have questions and answers. And don't forget to reply to our polls so that we know what you think about each of the sessions, if you're satisfied with it. And we really value your feedback, so we really expect a lot of participation there. So thanks in advance. Just a quick reminder, the rules for the questions that you want to ask us. Just remember that we will take the questions only when they're relevant to the session. So ask a question only if it's in the right, make sure you're in the right session before you ask a question. And then listen carefully to the presentations, because you might also receive a lot of answers to your questions in the presentations. And then before you ask a question, make sure that the question has not been asked before, because if it has been asked, we would advise you to like the question. And what happens when a question gets more likes, it has more chances to be treated in priority. So we would really advise you to like questions to give them a higher rating. So without further ado, I would pass the floor to my colleague Bernd Decker, Head of Sector Climate at CINEA, who will moderate this first session of the day on a climate action call. Bernd, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eva. Thanks for the nice introduction. And good morning to everyone, and welcome back to these info days. It's great to have you here. It's great that you show interest in the LIFE program, and in particular for the part of climate mitigation adaptation. So the next 1.5 hours, we have structured the session a little bit according to the priorities, or to give you more information about the priorities. I've been told that some of you have already printed the document, the call document, and put it under the pillow last night. And I've got the feedback that you have seen a couple of changes with climate action. This is exactly what we try to highlight also for those ones who are participating in the past or have participated in the last year's info day, to highlight also the changes, what is new in the priorities for this year, and for the newcomers, and you are the majority, the newcomers. It's of course very good or important that you carefully read the entire call document and familiarize yourself with its content. So we will have first a framing of the overall policy context, because the reason of some changes in the call document is related to the some changes in the actual policy context. So Stefanie Hiesinger will present those changes. Afterwards, we will then present you in detail the priorities for the call 2024 under climate action. So my colleagues, Darek, Fabio, Diana will present. After that presentation, we will have the opportunity to listen to a successful applicant from last year to get some experiences. And afterwards, we will have some 20-25 minutes time to answer your questions, which you may have after the presentations. So with this, I would like to introduce Stefanie Hiesinger, Head of Unit in DG Klima of the unit C3. Stefanie is dealing with low carbon solutions, partly research, low carbon technology development. She's not only responsible for the LIFE program, but also for the innovation program. So please, Stefanie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ben, and good morning, everybody. I'm pleased to be with you this morning to indeed give you a bit of an overview of the policy context in terms of climate policy. I have prepared a number of slides, which I'm not sure who's going to show them. Thank you. So when we talk about EU climate policy, of course, we cannot talk about EU climate policy without going back to the European Green Deal that was adopted in 2019, in December 2019, and which is a holistic plan to transform the EU into a modern, sustainable, resource-efficient and competitive economy. One of the aims, not the only aim, but one of the aims is, of course, to reach climate neutrality and resilience by 2050. Following the adoption of the European Green Deal, we have then proposed the first ever European climate law that enshrines the climate neutrality target by 2050 into legislation. The European climate law is a European regulation, and it has also set midterm targets to reduce emissions by at least 55% by 2030. And also it includes an obligation to come forward with a target for 2040. The EU institutions and the member states, according to the climate law, shall ensure continuous progress in enhancing the adaptive capacity, so in strengthening what we do on adaptation, but also resilience and reducing vulnerability, which is also important as it's the second pillar also for the LIFE program. The Commission in that context of adaptation shall assess on this duty to adapt at member state level and will check the consistency of national measures with union measures. Following the European Green Deal, I think what is really important is to show you the pathway that we have sketched out, and in particular, well, you can see already that measures already had effect since we're in the mid 2020s now. So we have already been reducing emissions. We will go further, come to 2030, 2040, and then be climate neutral by 2030. By 2050, you can see here the different sectors that are required to decarbonize, and you can also see that the sink, the land use and forests, so the natural sinks capacity, but also the technologies for carbon removals and carbon capture and storage will have to increase so that we reach the balance in 2050. What is also really important and that I wanted to show you on this slide is that we actually managed to decouple economic growth from the emissions in the EU economy. I said the Green Deal, the next step was the European climate law, and yeah, setting targets is one thing, but of course what matters actually much more is how these targets are implemented into policies. That's why in July 2021, the Commission adopted what we call the Fit for 55 package. So the package of legislative measures to deliver on the 55% reduction target by 2030. That package, as you can see on this slide, encompassed a broad number of legislative actions, not all new, but the revision of a number of key instruments such as the EU emissions trading system, but also the EU effort sharing regulation, which is covering the sectors that are not covered by the EU emissions trading system, but also a revision of the Renewable Energy Directive with higher targets for the rollout of renewables, the revision of the Energy Efficiency Directive, and a few new measures such as the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, but also Refuel EU aviation and Fuel EU maritime initiatives for the uptake of alternative fuels or for those sectors. Most of or I think all of the legislation in the Fit for 55 package are by now adopted and have become legislation, and we are working with high speed on the implementation on the ground of the changes that have been agreed. Another key pillar in this context, because from the slide I've shown you before, one sector that indeed needs to decarbonize and is relatively difficult to decarbonize, but also is quite important, of course, to ensure the competitiveness of the European economy is our industry. So one important pillar of the European Green Deal is also the Green Deal Industrial Plan, with a number of acts that have by now been adopted under this Green Industrial Plan. First and foremost, of course, the Net Zero Industry Act, on which a provisional agreement, so an agreement in trilogues between the European Parliament and the Council has been reached in February this year, and that in particular for, that it encompasses, of course, a number of measures, but when it comes to climate and industrial emissions, the Net Zero Industry Act contains recognizes first and foremost carbon capture and storage as a strategic net zero technology, and it includes an EU-wide objective of 50 million tons of annual CO2 injection capacity to be provided by 2030. And that obligation is weighing on the oil and gas producing industry to contribute to the development, in particular, of CO2 storage sites that will be needed to deal with what we call hard to abate emissions, in particular in industrial sectors. The Critical Raw Materials Act was adopted in March. It will well, we know critical raw materials are indispensable for the transition that we are looking at, and the Critical Raw Materials Act will ensure the EU's access to a secure, diversified, affordable and sustainable supply of these raw materials. Another key element is, of course, the promotion of hydrogen as a substitute for fossil fuels. We support already today hydrogen projects in line with the target that has been set by the Repower EU plan on the rollout of hydrogen, both at national or not at national, at the EU level, but also internationally via the EU Innovation Fund, on the one hand via the calls for proposals under the Innovation Fund, but also or under the European Hydrogen Bank, whereby the Innovation Fund supports or finances the first pilot auction under this European Hydrogen Bank for the production of renewable hydrogen. That auction was launched last year in November. The bidding window closed in February, and we have been evaluating the different bids, and we will make available the results at the end of this month. A second round of auctions under the European Hydrogen Bank for the domestic production of renewable hydrogen is currently being prepared and scheduled or foreseen for the last quarter of this year. And the last building block of the Green Deal industrial plan is the industrial carbon management strategy that the Commission also published in February, which is very much linked to the target, as I said, has been set by the Net Zero Industry Act, because it's a comprehensive strategy to actually set out how we are going to deal with the hard-to-abate emissions and how we are going to foster carbon capture and storage, carbon capture and utilization to ensure that we reach the climate neutrality target, and that also the necessary infrastructure for capturing the carbon on the one hand, but also storing it afterwards or using it afterwards is ensured. In line with our ambition on carbon management and this industrial carbon management communication, we have added a new area of intervention to the LIFE 2024 climate call for standard action projects to attract in particular and then support innovative small-scale projects demonstrating industrial solutions for CCU, CCS and carbon removals. That is one of the new areas of intervention, and the other one is climate adaptation and health, on which I will say a few words as well. Another important development in earlier this year is the adoption of the 2040 climate target communication, whereby the Commission recommends a 90% net greenhouse gas emissions reduction target by 2040 compared to 1990 levels. I already explained that this is stemming from the European climate law, whereby the Commission has a duty to look at the appropriate level of the 2040 climate target. The communication adopted also on 6th of February sets out a vision for the EU beyond 2030 to create indeed opportunities for investment, jobs and a strong industrial ecosystem. It, in particular, when it comes to industrial carbon management, analyzes the needs that we will have, and we know that we will, for example, on the basis of that analysis, capture around 280 million tons come 2040, but then also up to 450 million tons per year by 2050. Well, the communication is the kickstart of a discussion, a political discussion that we will have, in particular then towards setting a new target, for setting for the first time, I have to say, a target for 2040. Then if we go further towards climate adaptation, I already referred to it's in the European climate law, whereby we have established an obligation for the Union institutions and the member states to ensure continuous progress on adaptation, so the duty to adapt. And in order to implement this duty to adapt, we have adopted already in 2021 an EU adaptation strategy with 4 main objectives: to make adaptation smarter, to make it faster, to make it more systemic, and to step up international action on adaptation to climate change. To achieve, in particular, smarter adaptation, the strategy proposes a number of actions and that push the frontier of knowledge on adaptation and enhances Climate Adapt, which is a European platform for sharing adaptation knowledge. Also, well, there is the adaptation mission that is supposed to help EU regions and cities to build climate resilience. And then as a last building block, we have the European Climate Risk Assessment that identifies key risks and future policy priorities when it comes to adaptation policies.
One more minute, please.
Yeah, going a bit further on the European Climate Risk Assessment, we have published, or the European Environment Agency has published in March the European Climate Risk Assessment that assesses the climate change impacts and risks related to the environment, economy, and wider society in Europe. It addresses cross-border cascading compound climate risk and also assesses the European policy context, the risk ownership, and the urgency. Just after the European Climate Risk Assessment, the Commission has published a communication on managing climate risks in Europe, which stresses that policymakers can address the risks and call to action all levels of government. It sets out how the EU and its member states can anticipate, understand, and address growing climate risks. It would be useful to show the next slide. It encourages and prepares the policies that we will have to build to see, and also stresses the role of building and infrastructure standards in integrating climate adaptation and resilience. So we will move forward here on the adaptation quite quickly. I will, since time is running fast, I will not speak about our actions at international level, but of course also mitigation, but also adaptation and the operationalization of the new loss and damage fund at international level are quite important. Let me say a final word. I mentioned climate and health. There's a number of recent international policy developments on these issues. And while we all know climate change is a formidable challenge for public health and a risk multiplier, so we will have to address this more structurally. And that's why, at European level, a stronger focus will also be made on the link between climate and health in the European Health Union and in relevant programs. And again, I mentioned it before, against this background, we also decided to add a new area of intervention on climate adaptation and health in our live climate call for standard action projects. Was a bit of a comprehensive presentation. I tried to be quick and complete, but we are looking forward, of course, to working on making these new intervention areas of the LIFE program also a success. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Stephanie. An immediate question. Well, first a comment. I mean, yesterday already we highlighted the health component a bit as a new aspect, but with the focus on the Industrial Act and plan, we had a question yesterday, and I just wanted to get your views whether an industry could apply also for a strategic integrated project. I mean, we answered it positively, but maybe you have also a position on that. Stephanie?
Sorry, I had a technical problem on our side. Don't you have to repeat the question?
Okay. No, since there is a focus on industry through the Industrial Act and Plan, we had a question yesterday whether industry could also submit a strategic integrated project under LIFE, which we yesterday responded to positively, but maybe we could have also your views and position on it, whether and how industry could participate for strategic integrated projects.
Well, it's indeed, as you say, you know, under the normal call conditions, industrial players can also submit those projects for the strategic integrated calls. I don't have any further information than what you just already said on, but it's not precluded that industrial projects put forward their applications.
Because I think it would be even because we never had this type of projects yet, and we would even welcome, I think, industrial actors to come forward and to present something. So it's not only reserved for public authorities, but I mean, it would be very nice to receive something in that regard. Good. We need to move on because time is progressing. Thanks a lot again, Stephanie. Following the policy updates, I would like to invite my colleagues from the LIFE Klima team, so the LIFE at CINEA, the LIFE sub-program. We are currently 11 persons in the team, and 3 of them you will meet right now. Darek Urbaniak is Program Coordination Manager and Call Coordinator for Standard Action Projects. He is responsible for the climate change mitigation priority. Then Fabio Dallan is Program Coordination Manager and Call Coordinator for this strategic integrated projects from the climate side, and he is responsible for climate change adaptation priority. And Diana Oanja is Project Advisor working on various files, in particular on climate change adaptation, but she's also responsible for the LIFE governance priority. So please, Darek, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Bernd. Thank you for the introduction. And thank you, of course, Stephanie, as well, for the nice presentation on policy. This helps to lay the ground for what we are going to do right now. So good morning to everyone. What we will do now, we'll present more details of the 2024 call. As you know, the call has three topics that cover climate change mitigation, adaptation, and governance and information. I'll speak now about the mitigation part, and then my colleague Fabio will move to adaptation, and Diana will share or introduce the part that is related to governance. What we will try to do is to present you the key priorities and areas of intervention in the way that they are outlined in the call document, which you already know from Bernd that you know quite well because you're sleeping with the document already last night. So probably a lot of this won't be surprise to anyone, but still we'll go through this. Then we plan to share you some examples that cover some of the most exemplary priority areas. So to give you an idea how the project priorities or the priorities of the call are turned into practical solutions. In this part will be more technical. Again, we'll focus more on detail and technical aspects of the call. And again, with an aim to help you to identify what is the right priority and scope for you or for your application or idea that you may have. I will start with the CCM part. And as Bernd mentioned, there is a number of changes, and there are changes in this specific part. Previously, in the last few years, this topic, climate change mitigation, has only 4 areas of intervention. Now it has 7. So my presentation will be slightly longer. But I wanted to highlight the fact that there are those 7 areas of intervention instead of 4, because quite some of you are planning to resubmit your applications. So please go through the call document carefully and do not resubmit your application automatically, because there might be not the priority this year that you submitted your application before. Of course, everyone should carefully read the call document and to identify the right intervention areas. This is crucial for the success of your application. Perhaps if you could move now to the first slide. Oh, no, we're already on the first slide. Thank you. So starting with this slide, we'll present you the areas of intervention, again, in the order as they're outlined in the call document. And the first area of intervention for climate change mitigation is related to recovery, recycling, and reclamation of ozone-depleting substances in foams and suitability of alternatives to F-gases and their recovery, reclamation, and recycling. Now, the new added element this year is the foams, which were not present so prominently before. Of course, the insulation foams are one of the major sources of ODS and F-gases, and high emissions occur in buildings using such foams are renovated or demolished, and then the foams are crushed or shredded, landfilled without treatment, and they release ODS and F-gases. So this priority area also encourages you to focus on identifying and removing barriers that are posed by standards. As you all know, the F-gas policy is quite high on the top of the policy agenda, and recently the relevant EU regulations have been refreshed, renewed with new targets. So this entire area is targeting the refrigeration, air conditioning, and heat pump industries more prominently than before. And of course, another important aspect of this area of intervention is identification of climate-friendly alternative to F-gases. Again, it's been one of the most popular, and it is one of the most popular areas for applicants. We do receive quite a high number of applications that are focusing on replacing F-gases. For example, if in low and high voltage circuit breakers, ice cream making machines, refrigerators, or air conditionings. We'll show some examples later on, but now I would outline the second area of intervention, which is focusing on supporting activities that help to shift to zero emission mobility in road transport. And this current call specifically encourages projects that will contribute to the sustainable urban mobility plans and also to actions that are foreseen in the EU sustainability and smart mobility strategy. For this area, we image that all policy levers must be pulled, and specifically welcome measures that will significantly reduce the dependence on fossil fuels, including through the integration of zero-emission vehicles and renewable energy systems. And the actions should also shift more activities towards sustainable transport mode and mobility patterns. Next slide, please. Thank you. The third area of information is also focusing on transport. However, it's focusing on other transport mode, so primarily non-road transport, and it aims to support fostering intermodality and modal shift. The current call encourages a number of technological options that aim at reducing the energy, for example, by reducing the weight, improving aerodynamics, also support to operational aspects of hubs, so ports and airports, by supporting the let's say, improving the loading and offloading of passengers or cargo, optimizing capacity, and other areas that are of operations that are related to hubs. And the focus is also on intermodal solutions, so modes optimization, integrated data sharing, and service booking, just to name a few. The fourth area of intervention aims at or we seek for proposals that will increase the generation and use of renewable energy and improvement of energy efficiency. As far as these actions are not covered under specific calls under Clean Energy Transition subprogram that will be presented tomorrow. So we will also invite you to participate tomorrow, as there are some overlaps, and it's quite important to participate in both sessions. If you have a project, if you're planning project that is aiming at this specific priority, then it's best to participate in both events to clearly identify where you should prepare where you should submit your application. For Klima, the focus is on the element of REPowerEU, that is aiming to help production of biogas and biomethane from waste and residue streams. Next slide, please. Thank you. The fifth area of intervention is related to actions which should aim at reducing energy and energy use and greenhouse gas emissions in industrial production and waste management. The focus here is on development and demonstration of innovative. I think you've heard that word quite often, and we focus on innovation. So innovative and cost-effective technologies and processes. Of course, the focus is also on specific design, development, and implementation of those actions. We anticipate that projects that are submitted should start no lower than at TRL 5, Technology Readiness Level 5, and end at level 8-9. So quite a ready level for market uptake. The sixth area of intervention is aiming at development and implementation of land and coastal management practices. All of those practices which have impact on emissions and carbon removals, including conservation and enhancement of natural carbon sinks and forest, also storage of carbon in long-lasting products. The current call encourages practices that should enhance carbon removals in soil and biomass, practices that protect existing carbon stocks, use of harvested biomass, and the promotion of carbon farming approach. Next slide, please. Thank you. And this is the last 7 area of intervention for climate change mitigation. It focuses on industrial solutions for carbon removal, carbon capture, use, and storage, as CCU. Projects here should be, of course, in line with the EU ambitions that support the development of relevant parts of the value chain for carbon capture, and focus here is on industrial solutions for carbon removal from atmospheric and biogenic sources. So I'll stop here with the description of the 7 areas of intervention. Please review the call document very carefully. Again, there are quite a few more details. I only focus on kind of high-level elements of the call, but there are more details in the call document that should help you to fine-tune which area is more suitable for your idea and application. And we do advise that you do that ahead of time.
Please speed up your part.
Yeah. Thank you, Bert. Now we prepare a few examples for you. 3 examples of F-gases projects that are currently being implemented, and 1 example from energy-intensive industries. The first example, Italian project like the V-Corpan, is focusing to demonstrate a new solution for commercial and domestic coal appliances, production of new vacuum-improved insulation that will ultimately try to reduce the energy consumption from commercial appliances by 12% and from domestic refrigerators by 17%. And the technology that is used here is called open cell foams. The second example, Life Grid, the image with the red pipe, it's one of the projects that is focusing on replacing F-gases in circuit breakers. This one is focusing on high voltage circuit breakers, replacing the traditional SF6 with an environmentally friendly alternative. The end effect will be that this new gas will have almost 99% reduced CO2 equivalent value. This project is prepared or supported, development was supported by with some of the European transmission networks. And as you know, Europe is leading in this area. So this will, if developed, this will be one of the first in the world environmentally friendly cooled circuit breaker. And the third example is a Polish project that is focusing on, also focusing on F-gases. It aims at collecting refrigerant waste, separating them. They develop an installation for separation of waste refrigerant mixtures. And the project itself also aims at improving awareness raising and and support knowledge about this issue. And the last project that is focusing on energy-intensive industry, Life Rapid Dry, Italian project, is developing new kiln that is optimizing the drying process of ceramic manufacturing, which will reduce the energy consumption and emissions while at the same time maintain the quality of the product. So I'll stop here actually, and I will hand over to my colleague Fabio, who will be presenting the climate change adaptation elements. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Derek. So let's move on to the adaptation priorities. Can we have the next slide, or possibly the next 2 slides? There are 9 priorities in climate change adaptation. Let's move on. They are fairly similar to the one of last year, with the new addition that Stephanie already mentioned on climate and health. So I will go through these 9 priorities and also give some example at the end, as my colleague Darren did for the climate change mitigation part. The first priority is clearly on policy development and adaptation plans, because adaptation needs to be treated in a comprehensive manner, and it has several facets that goes to influence different sectors of our economy. So mainstreaming is one, and governance is one of the key element for climate change adaptation. So this is clearly the first priority mentioned in the call document. So it has a transversal nature, therefore it can be at national, regional and local level geographically, and it has to use the best science and knowledge to be able to plan where the first intervention needs to be taking place. It can also pool over some resources for other funding program and coordinate therefore actions from different sectors. The second priority is connected to the first one, so it develops those knowledge and tools to be able to address the priorities where needed. So it can be modeling of adaptation impacts, climate impacts. It can also relate to risk assessment, but also vulnerability assessment, or it can be related to monitoring adaptation solutions and evaluating them. Next slide, please. The third priority is on nature-based solutions. This is quite transversal. It can be applied in urban or rural environments, agriculture, forests, coasts, marine areas. It can be related to guidance and capacity building or sustainable financial approaches, but we more and more see that we have demonstration and application of this technology in our winning proposals. So simple guidance and capacity building will not be enough. We need to see the solution, the practice in place with an evaluation, possibly also of the benefits and the cost of such solution. More and more also we want to leverage investments from other sources to be able to deploy nature-based solutions in different places, environments, and use life as a mean to leverage more capacity, financial capacity. The fourth topic is on climate proofings of and resilience of infrastructure. Here there's actually a guidance document from the Commission. That's the small figure on the left, bottom left of the slide. If you look for the EU guidance on climate proofing and resilience of infrastructure, you will find it very easily. It can be related to critical infrastructure, but also to buildings, and it wants to evaluate the risk for such infrastructure and mitigate such a risk with appropriate measures on existing infrastructure or also for planning and constructing new infrastructure or buildings. Next slide, please. The next intervention areas relates to farmers, forests, management, and Nature 2000 management site management. So here it's really wide again as a scope. Any intervention areas that has to do with afforestation, reforestation is welcome. It can also relate to agriculture in improving the diversity of the plants, introducing more climate resilient plants, or using decision support system to facilitate this transition towards an agriculture that is more climate proof. Or it can also relate, as the last bullet says, on water saving technologies in agriculture. The sixth intervention area is on water management. This relates more precisely on water saving, water quality, therefore the end pipe of the, let's say, the water cycles for human consumption. And it can also relate to, as said, water saving, therefore how to manage periods of droughts and lack of water scarcity. The next slide, please. Okay, here we are on the climate and health topic. So this is a novelty for this year. This topic wants to generate some knowledge and consider solutions that, while adapting to climate change, will also provide improvements on the health system. Health system is seen here as wide as possible. So as the second bullet says, and I want to draw your attention there, any positive health outcomes. So it could be on the food and agriculture sector, water and sanitation, housing, urban planning, healthcare, transport, and energy. So it's very wide in scope, and it leaves the freedom of the applicant to come up with ideas in that respect. It can also be focused on the health system per se, therefore improving the resilience of the health system by, for example, and this is only an example, boosting climate information services, early warning response systems, or even just creating a knowledge capacity into the health system. So creating climate literate health workforce. And scaling up investment, you've seen it also in the other topics. It's again an element that wants to that the LIFE program tries to incentivize for pooling other resources on top of what the EU is placing in its project. At the bottom of this slide, you will also see two links, one on the European Observatory on Climate and Health and a specific report of the European Environment Agency on climate and health that can help you build your proposal in line with the expectations. The next slide, please. So the last two priority areas concerns one, the cascading effect and compounds risks. Here we are more on the upscale of the water cycle management. Therefore, we look at river basin management, for example. Here we want specifically though to look at cascading effects and compound risks. So impacts that have multiple facets and they are related therefore to preparing for extreme weather events, extreme rainfall, and apply those solutions that can mitigate the occurrence of cascading risks.
Please accelerate.
Yes, the last financial, the last intervention area is on financial instruments. This, generally speaking, is related to increase the intervention of insurance, in the penetration of insurance in the market. It can be in the private sector, but it can also be in the public sector by strengthening the dialogue of insurers and policymakers and local authorities, and prevents, therefore, cover the risks from natural disasters. I will go now to the next slide and show you a few examples of projects that we have in the areas that I mentioned before. They are just samples, but you will find more projects on the Life Public database. The first two projects relate to nature-based solutions. They can be used for mitigating the effect of urban heat islands, like in Life Green Heart on the left side, or for the topic of resilient buildings. Then we have the Life Archiclima. It's a Polish project. Let's go ahead for the next slide. More generally speaking, nature-based solutions is also covered in Life Pact. Here, nature-based solutions are used for water retention measures for mitigating the effect of floods. More upstreams on river basin management, we have Life Flores. It's a Slovakian project that focuses on flash floods prediction and prevention systems. And finally, the next slide, please. We have projects as well on forest management and coastal management. Here are two simple examples, Life Via and Life Adapto. Life Adapto is a dated project from 2016 that got to the end, but it's nominated to be a Life awarded project. So potentially it's one of our best example of project. So these are just samples. Please don't limit yourself to this, and go check our public database for more examples and more ideas. And with this, I conclude and I pass the floor to my colleague Diana.
Thank you, Fabio. If we could move to the next slide, please. Okay, and we move to the climate governance and information strand. This year, we do have a couple of changes. Some of the topics have been compiled for simplification, while there are also some novelties. And I start with the first priority area on raising awareness, incentivizing behavioral change, and support the activities of the European Climate Pact. And here, just to give you a couple of examples, we're looking for projects that would work on the role of carbon removals and carbon farming to reach climate neutrality, or projects that work on the functioning of ETS on buildings, road transport, and the additional sectors, or projects that work on engagement activities to support most vulnerable citizens who are affected by energy and transport poverty. Moving to the second priority area. No, if you could go back, please. Yes. So the second priority area is a new one on green skills and capacity building to implement climate policies. And here we could expect projects that work on certification schemes for climate and environmental professionals, like, for example, in the heating and cooling sectors, or installers of photovoltaic panels. Then projects that enhance the public-private collaborations to develop regional or national carbon capture and storage plans, or projects that draw up indicative voluntary sectoral roadmaps. The third priority areas is on building capacity, raising awareness, raising among end users, and the equipment distribution chain of fluorinated greenhouse gases. The whole idea is we need to further enhance the capacity of the personnel to service equipment with climate-friendly alternatives. Then the fourth priority area is on the support to development, update, and implementation of national, regional, and local climate and energy strategies and plan, while of course enhancing cooperation between stakeholders, supporting reporting, and developing quantifiable goals. The fifth priority areas is on activities linked to development and implementation of sustainable finance actions. And here we are looking for projects that further develop metrics and benchmark that improve the transparency, accessibility, and comparability of data, or develop and implement innovative financial solutions that support just transition, or incentivize the sustainable consumption and production, or the use of nature-based solutions. The sixth priority area is on greenhouse gas emission monitoring and reporting. And here particularly, we are looking for activities that strengthen the national, regional, and local capacity to monitor and report on greenhouse gas emissions and control trade, and solutions that enhance cooperation and coordination between the national authorities and relevant agencies and other actors on greenhouse gas emissions, monitoring and reporting, and also F-gases in the area of F-gases, especially on illegal trading. Then the seventh priority area is on development of geographically explicit inventories for LULUCF sector, creation of carbon removals, registries, and certification schemes, and organization of capacity building activities and advisory services, which I think it's a very broad area and encompasses a lot of different aspects that you could pin on. Then the eighth priority area is on knowledge sharing and capacity building on the functioning of the EU ETS. This is an area that we traditionally had it. It was quite a popular area in the governance and information. Again, we are looking for building broader international networks of experts, widening dissemination of knowledge, and building consensus and political support for carbon markets. So working on emissions inventories, projections, monitoring, and evaluation of the ETS policies. And the last priority area is on climate policy monitoring, assessment, and ex-post evaluation. As usual, we're looking for comparative assessments of different policies and measures at national, regional, and local levels. We're also looking for projects that enhance cooperation between different stakeholders to promote robust monitoring and assessments and ex-post evaluation of climate policies. And if we could move to the next slide. Here we have a couple of examples of what a governance and information project could look at. The first project is illustrating the EU Climate Pact priority, and is empowering local communities to co-create and implement do-it-yourself solutions. They have several types of interventions, be it online challenges where people can implement individually different solutions like sealing windows, or workshops where people receive further practical instructions and support to develop do-it-yourself activities like insulating story ceilings, or community projects that are implemented jointly and require resources and ongoing support, like developing community gardens or car sharing schemes. Then a second project illustrating the FCASE's priority area is on development and implementation of a model of cooperation between state authorities and other entities to improve the monitoring in the area of FCASEs and their illegal trade. And then, as I was saying, a popular area in this trend is the EU ETS, where we have several projects. Life DSET, for example, is working on deepening the international cooperation on emission trading. Life Class has developed a collaborative observatory for the assessment of EU ETS to support EU and member states policymakers to implement and develop the EU ETS, also including its integration into other emission trading systems. Or Life View 2050 is doing an impact assessment of the EU ETS with a long-term vision for a climate neutral economy by 2050. So if we could move to the next slide. Yeah, so we have also a couple of tips for you, like kind of recurrent errors that we have seen, and maybe we want to guide you. For example, on climate change adaptation, we really encourage you that the adaptation actions are linked to risk or vulnerability assessments that you have identified, and then with the actions you are going to try to address. In the governance strands, we considered that the awareness raising should be coupled with governance-related activities. This is how you're going to really ensure that you are going to have a significant impact. On projects related to nature-based solutions, actions should be appropriate to increase the resilience of the areas in different climate scenarios. So having really a time span in the future, and again, looking at the different scenarios and vulnerability assessments. And because we have priority areas to develop tools, the tools to be developed are to be used in policymaking and implementation during the project. So not only developing the tool, but also putting it into practice. Next slide. And a final financial item on the financial support to third party. It's very important that you define the criteria for awarding this financial support to third party in your proposal. This means the activities to be funded, the conditions for selections, the type and amount of financial support to be clarified. And this you will find in the call for the details. Next slide, and I think we are actually at the final slide. Darek, would you like to take over?
Yes, most definitely.
Please close it quickly. Yeah,
very quickly.
Late. Yes.
Okay, so to be quick, we're publishing, of course, we publish on 18th. The deadline for CLIMA is 17th. Maximum funding rate 60%, as you can see. The total available budget we have is around 62 million, and we anticipate to sign the grant agreements in May, June the next year. On the right-hand side, you see in the table, this is an approximate allocation per topic. So for CCM and CCA, we roughly envisage 28.5 million for each of the streams, and for Gov around 5 million. And then you can see the approximate indication of what the budget could be of a project and the estimate number of projects to be funded. And of course, to wrap this up, the agency reserved the right that we allocate this budget slightly differently according to the priorities and the scorings received in or the assessment of the projects in those different streams. So we look forward to your applications, and hopefully we have a good quality and we can use up the budget that is planned for this current call. Back to you, Bernd.
Thank you, Darek, Fabio, Diana. We need to move on so that we still have some space for questions. But before we go to questions, I would like to invite Joshua Gallegos. This will not be a presentation, but we will have a short interview together. Joshua, you are leading the research and development part of the company Field Factors, which is a Dutch water technology startup located in Delft University for Technology. It's interesting. You are or you origin from Albuquerque in New Mexico, so you are used to areas with scarcity in water supply, and this is where you are working actually to bring first nature back to cities, but also to find pragmatic solutions to water for climate adaptation and solutions for water. Last year, you have submitted a proposal with the acronym Live Green LED, and you were awarded with a project, and you combine large-scale rainwater reuse with purification and identification technology, which is very innovative and novel. So that's a very good project fitting well into the priorities. But we are not interested in the project itself, but more in the way you have been developing the proposal. And well, my first question would be, would you ever do it again?
Yeah, I think we would do it again. It's definitely a lot less intimidating after you go through the first round, and of course having a successful result in the first round also helps.
So how did you start? I mean, when did you start? How long did it take you to prepare the proposal?
We had been discussing it for quite some time. I think we actually were planning to submit for the previous year, but just getting the partners organized took a little longer than we thought. In the end, I think the writing we spent probably 3 or 4 months on after we decided to take it on ourselves.
So you would consider it helpful that we keep the priority stable? Is that because you were planning to submit it earlier?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I think our technology is quite applicable to a lot of the adaptation discussions going on right now. So focusing on urban water and decentralization, I think was the fact that it fits so well helped us a lot in the decision to go forward. Mm.
Did you have previous experiences in applying for LIFE, or was it the first one, the first project?
Yeah, for us, it was the first project. We had previously gotten some smaller funding with Field Factors ourselves, but one of the other project partners that we have in Spain, who's another technology provider, did have previous experience with LIFE, and that was really invaluable. Just in covering the breadth of the application process, it is quite something to sort of wrap yourself around the first time, I would say.
So what were the main challenges you were confronted with?
I think it was just the bulk of things that needed to be completed. So that was the main thing. We of course got the advice to read everything 3 times over and fill out very specifically what's being asked. We were also advised that we probably shouldn't do it ourselves, given the size of our organization. We're quite small. So I ended up speaking with a number of consultants actually, and after hearing kind of what the fees were and what kind of thinking about what kind of workload would be required to communicate our information to them, we decided to just go forward, and with a lot of support from the other technology partner, I think we were able to put things together quite well.
Okay, so that's an interesting point. So that means writing the proposal is also a very costly exercise. I mean, either you pay a consultant with the respective fees, or you have to invest a lot of human resources yourself.
Yeah, indeed, and how much you can actually reduce the burden of your own time by hiring the consultant was really a critical point for us in deciding to just go forward ourselves.
So what would be your, let's say, main recommendations to potential applicants? I mean, we have heard yesterday that about 2/3 are newcomers to live, or at least to the info day. So what would you recommend to them?
Yeah, I think the first thing that helped us the most, of course, is having someone with previous experience. So our partner, Apria Systems, has been involved with multiple life projects, and I think it had changed the year that we applied a bit, so they were a little bit unfamiliar with the call themselves, but just having some idea of all that would be required, and then again digging into each piece to see what it is exactly you need to fill in. There is a bit of ambiguity, I think, at certain times, and I think just pushing forward to try to present a very good picture of how what you are doing aligns with different goals, and maybe even taking some initiative in how that is presented was quite helpful for us.
Mm-hmm. The grant agreement preparation process, I mean, of those ones who then pass the first step, of course, you probably then open a bottle of champagne, and but then you go into the grant agreement preparation process, which is probably also time-consuming and sort of tough period. Did you experience like this, or was it more a good experience?
To be honest, I think we were quite surprised to get to that part. We did have some hiccups during the initial submission based on the way the system was set up, and having to enter some information manually at the last moment. I remember the part A and B of the application were a little bit confusing, because one part is sort of part of the other part as you're going into it your first time. But I think actually the grant agreement process was less difficult for us. Mm-hmm. I think because we had prepared pretty well based on the advice we'd received.
Mm-hmm. And now you started your project, you are in it. So is it progressing as you have intended it in the proposal and in the project document?
I would say so far it is. We deal with municipalities and sort of urban redevelopment projects with our work. So we are used to a lot of delays and issues with things like permitting and different budgets coming together. But in this particular case, it's been quite lucky, I think, because the projects have been moving forward at a solid pace on both of the demonstrator locations.
Okay, very good. Anything else you would like to mention regarding your project?
I think we're just excited to have the opportunity to bring together the different locations in this single project, and to be able to put our technology at a presentation at that level. We've had a lot of good interaction with the people at SINEA, and I think had good support since the beginning of the process. So we're excited to see the systems come online in the next couple of years here.
Mm-hmm. That's great to hear. Great. Well, Joshua, thanks a lot. Unfortunately, we need to move on with the question and answer session. So thanks for being with us. And I hope that potential applicants would be able also to contact you to get advice if they would need, as you did probably with other entities.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been my pleasure.
Great. Great, thanks for having you. And we move on into and go to the question and answer session. We have already seen quite a number of questions coming up, or also from yesterday. And so it would be good to have to get those questions on screen. And during the presentations, I could see quite some activities on Slido. So you have the link there. And so we have the first question. For implementing biodiversity-rich urban district urban greening project, including innovative stormwater management solutions, would you suggest to apply for the nature and biodiversity or adaptation sub-program? I'm going to take this question immediately myself because yeah, because we are getting very often this kind of question, also with regards to circular economy, quality of life. I mean, we have, of course, some priorities which are bridging into the other sub-programs. It depends very much on your starting point. Where do you start from, and which policies you are addressing? If your main priority is on nature restoration and focus on biodiversity, then of course the right place would be a nature biodiversity. If your first interest is to make the area or the urban area more resilient with regards to climate change, and you follow the various guidance documents, whether it's the EU adaptation strategy or the national adaptation strategies, you may even have local adaptation strategies, then of course the right place would be under the climate change adaptation sub-program. So you need to decide yourself, and then you need to convince us or the external evaluators in the way you are presenting it and from which angle you are presenting it. Of course, you can gain additional points by showing synergies with other sub-programs, synergies with other themes, and that, of course, is very much welcome that you also reflect on those ones. For climate adaptation, there is priority area for nature-based solutions. Here is to say the focus on critical infrastructure. How strict is this, and what does it mean for projects focusing on blue-green infrastructure in city centers? I wonder whether there is a participant from, whether Stephanie or Angelo from DG Klima are also present. If yes, please, could you switch on your camera?
You have Stephanie with you, Bernd. We see her.
Okay. Stephanie, would you be able to answer that question? What critical infrastructure would mean in that context?
Thanks, Bernd. Yes, I'm still with you, but I have to admit that I'm not able to, on the spot, answer the question what critical infrastructure in that context means. I would need to get back to the experts and provide a written response to this question.
Maybe Fabio from the presentation you gave on the priorities. Do you have further information?
Well, I must say that the topic is pretty open, and we have also projects focusing on blue and green infrastructure. Therefore, maybe more if the writer wants to specify better the questions, because to me it looks like the NBS can be applied in many different regards, and critical infrastructure has its own topic, but NBS is open for many different applications.
Okay, thanks. So we will try to look into this and add information to the question later on. There is a further question which is related to infrastructure investment. So, it does not address infrastructure, but on infrastructure investment, is there upper limit? Just very briefly, we are not, I mean, LIFE is funding demonstration activities, pilot and demonstration activities, so we cannot, of course, finance big investments. And you have seen from the funding which we have available, I mean, an average budget of a project, of a standard action project, is in the range of between 1.5 and 5 million. And I mean, sometimes a zebra crossing could, with a traffic light, could cost even more than this. So, I mean, we cannot fund big investments, but of course we can contribute to the cost of investment investments, and we can allow limited infrastructure in the proposals or in the projects. In the previous times, we had about 500,000 cost as a guidance. Of course, it can be lower, it can be higher if well justified. Look for the value for money in this regard, and whether it really makes sense and it's important to for fulfilling the objectives of your proposal. The next question: is it possible to submit energy projects in the LIFE Climate sub-program for topics that do not fall under LIFE CET? Darek, or yeah, I would ask Darek.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. So the clear answer is, yeah, I mean, general answer will be to that, yes. As you recall during my presentation, I mentioned that projects that do not fit under CET could qualify under the LIFE sub-program for climate mitigation. However, the way the question is formulated would not really fit, because the objective of our call is to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. So if the focus of the project is to reduce the emissions, and as an additional element or through an energy reduction, then such project would definitely qualify.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, the next question would go to you, since you're call coordinator. As expert evaluators are often employees of companies from specific sectors, a conflict of interest may arise. How do we secure this?
Yeah, thank you for this question. Of course, as you know, the LIFE applications are evaluated by external body, by independent experts. The underlying element of our relationship is that there is a very strong legally based conflict of interest or non-conflict of interest process that each expert need to sign and adhere. Also during the process, we monitor very closely, and experts need to identify before, during the process, if they have a relationship to the projects that are submitted. There are some specific timelines, for example, of period of where expert last time was working or is planning to work with specific entity. And if there is any potential conflict of interest, which the expert would not report, and we would find out, then such expert would be excluded from the process. And this is the non-conflict of interest is also related even to us internally. We are also required to sign a non-conflict of interest declaration during each evaluation and assessment process. So I think this clarifies the answer.
Thanks.
So there is a rigorous process in place. Thank you.
Thanks, Darek. The next question is best practice solution in agriculture and forestry, a topic to be covered under climate sub-program. Well, it's a little bit generic, this question. I mean, we have agriculture, forestry under both priorities, climate change mitigation, climate change adaptation. Best practice is per se as a project type allowed. So I would say yes, I mean, in whatever direction you go. So that's that would be my answer for this bit generic question. The next two questions I would like to ask again, DG Klima, Stephanie, if you could, in terms of the project ideas, of course, it's very difficult, challenging based on two lines to make an, let's say, a recommendation, but there is one potential applicant or interested person who is looking for a research grant, but please, LIFE is not funding research. So it's a grant on collection, purification and storage of CO2 for production of brick, incorporating solid waste and construction waste.
Yes, Ben, thanks. Well, you know, we're of course looking with the LIFE program at concrete projects that have an impact, while, you know, research grants are actually allocated in another program, which is Horizon Europe. So I think, you know, from what I read in the two lines, I think the LIFE program would probably not be the program to go to, but rather apply for a grant for research projects under Horizon Europe. But,
and if they would remove the research part and really build bricks incorporating solid waste and construction waste, I'm a little bit concerned with the waste aspect in this because that can invite, of course, using such technologies as let's say to dispose certain waste.
Well, I think, you know, that's why it's difficult to judge based on two lines what concretely is done. You could also look at it depending on what they do, that it's linked to circular economy. And then there are, at least for the climate mitigation part, when there's storage of CO2, when there's CCU, when there's a real impact on emissions. Yes, but I think the bottom line is here that we really need to see impacts with the projects that we have, while, you know, if we are at a level of research that doesn't seem to be fitting into the LIFE program.
Thanks. The next question, would adjusting water reservoirs and adjusting the operation of hydropower plants to limit flooding fall under the call for climate change adaptation, under water management or preparedness for compound risk and cascading risks? I don't know who would like to, either Fabio or Stephanie.
Well, I can give an answer. By reading this question, I would say, well, flooding, yes, but then you need to also look at the compound risk and cascading risks, because flooding by itself is one element, but then you need to look at knock-on effects, whether there are. So the priority wants to focus on these knock-on effects and not flooding per se, but there is potential.
I would recommend to the person who asked a question to look into the database, because we have a couple of projects running which are adjusting water reservoirs, also in the operation of hydropower plants. So we have projects, and so please maybe inspire yourself with these kind of examples. We have Oksana saying, hello, can mental health and well-being be a subject under this line, climate adaptation and health? Oof, that's now difficult. I mean, it's a very new new topic for this year. Fabio, what would you probably more recommend than
Well, yes, it's also difficult for us, right? Because we don't want to prevent anyone not to apply, but at the same time, we cannot guarantee, because it's not up to us, it's up to the external experts to evaluate the topic and have also a full proposal rather than 2 lines. But what I would say, the topic is new, so would welcome any new ideas. So why not?
I mean, this relates, of course, to all priorities. I mean, the priorities are will be assessed in the well, you describe them in the first chapter of your proposal under the chapter relevance, and we provide scores for addressing those priorities. But of course, if a proposal is, let's say, contributing to the reduction of greenhouse gas emission or increasing the resilience of our society, and proposes a solution which is outside the priorities which we have set out in the call document, then of course you can also submit such a proposal. You will not receive the scores for addressing the priorities, but it can still be a competitive proposal. So, and also for this mental health, I would say yes. I would encourage you also to look into this, because that can be an aspect of this priority even. We are now running into the coffee break, so I will need to close. There is one question further down. Does live program calls cover agri-PV? Yes, we do, and you can find examples from the last call, so please look at those ones. I still take maybe the next one because it has 3 likes. Can an organization be part of several proposals under different calls under Live 24, as it can be a lead applicant or only as a lead and others applicants? Yes, you can be part of several proposals, but of course you have to be make sure that you have the capacity to deliver, because you also have to co-finance the 40% which is not covered by the European Commission. You have to cover those ones. So please carefully look at your cash flow situation. So I will have to close now here. Would like to thank all of you for your participation in this session. More sessions to come where you can also ask the question later on today. There will be again a general question and answer session, so we may take up one or the other question with high score, with high likes, to answer them. And I would also like to say thanks to the presenters, Stephanie, great that you were here, Darek, Fabio, Diana, and in particular Joshua, to provide some insights from the proposal preparation. And with this, I close this session and I hand over to my colleague Eva.
Yes, thanks a lot, Bernd, for moderating this session, and thanks to all the speakers. I would like to quickly, before the coffee break, to launch the first poll of the day. Please go to Slido and take just a few seconds to reply to this poll on how would you rate this first information session on the calls for proposals for life climate action, climate change mitigation, and climate change adaptation. Just please go to Slido quickly and let us know what you thought. We really value your feedback, and we will take it into account for the next EU Info Day. And then before we go to the coffee break, I would just like to remind you that we are waiting for you at 10:40 on the same link, just on the same place. We will be with our colleagues on the circular economy and quality of life team, and my colleague Nadia Lamandats will moderate this session. So they will present the calls for proposals for standard action projects on circular economy and quality of life. So please be back on time at 10:40. And now I would just tell you, enjoy the break, take a coffee, stretch your legs, take a sip of water, and see you in 5-10 minutes. Bye-bye.